Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our Conversations. This is a program that we are organizing since 2018. Conversations on the future of authorship. What is the future of authorship? We've been doing so in different places. Here in Arnhem, we are back here again. We did it in Madrid and other places, and everything is to be found on YouTube. If you search for Conversations on the Future of Authorship, you will find it. This is live streamed. We are in Arnhem in the Rosette. Thank you so much for having us here, and thank you so much for joining us. My name is Frank Tazelaar. I'm the director of Wintertuin, and my co-host is Kim van Kaam.
Thank you, Frank. I'm Kim van Kaam. I work as a talent developer and project coordinator of our international project SILA at Wintertuin. In that position, I have been organizing a series of events like this together with Frank. And we try to develop a continuous conversation about the status quo in literature and its relation to, I guess, the world around us. Last edition was in Madrid. We were also together on stage with a bunch of international panelists and video contributors, as we are today. And we talked about solidarity in Madrid in May, April of this year. And my main take there, I think the concept that stuck most to me was the idea of a splendid individual and how we still tend to see authors as splendid individuals. This was coined by Rebecca de Wit, Dutch author, and she really recommended to leave that concept behind us to create more solidarity. Yeah. And I think, Frank, that really stuck to us. We've been, I think, mentioning the idea of a splendid individual every week since then. Yes. And also brought us to the question today. Today, yes. And today we will have two panels, all consisting of splendid individuals. And I will just briefly introduce you. We will get to you later, but to just tell everybody who you are. So we have Flurina Badel from Switzerland. She's a writer. Lisa Weeda from the Netherlands, a writer as well. And Clarice Gargard from the Netherlands, and a writer as well. And before we start our conversation, we invited people to pose questions to us. This is the way we always do this, to have the conversation broadened. Kim, maybe you can introduce the two videos that we will watch first, right? Yeah. So we've asked two international guests who couldn't be here live, but just to add a broader sense to this conversation. One of them is Julia Simafieva. She will pronounce it better herself in the video, and she's a Belarusian poet, translator, and one of the founders and editors of a Belarusian literary magazine called, in translation, Pass the World. And she's written 3 poetry collections and has been translated into, among other languages, English and Dutch, so available for you all to read, I hope. And the other video contributor is Vladimir Arsenjevich. He's a writer from Serbia, and he's the director of a Serbian literary organization, but also very much so cultural activistic organization called Crocodile, who is hosting festival, educational programs, residencies, etc. And Vladimir usually works all around the world because he has always also, both these video contributors have been exiled in the past and present from their homes. So yeah, let's watch them. Yeah. Thank you.
My name is Julia Simafieva. I'm an author and translator from Belarus. Unfortunately, after the unprecedented repressions used by the state against its own people who took to the streets for months after the 4 presidential elections, I had to leave my country in 2020. And as hundreds of thousands of other Belarusians, I have been living in exile in Europe ever since, while thousands of people are imprisoned on the political grounds in the country, and among them not less than 165 cultural figures. I have never dreamt of being an activist in the political sense of this word. Though now, looking back, I believe I have been as such in the cultural field for many years. Before 2020, together with my colleagues, we've been writing and translating texts, publishing magazines and books, meeting for the lectures and readings in the small independent bookstores, educated young writers, organizing literary festivals and Belarusian language courses, bringing foreign authors to the interested local public. All these activities saw hundreds of small and big events and projects have been done with no support from the state. Very often these projects were done on the volunteer basis or as side jobs or with the support from abroad. In those years, the regime of Alexander Lukashenko pretended the cultural ghetto we had built and lived in had no influence or even did not exist, and we pretended their propagandistic culture was no harm for us. For around 10 years, we were enjoying our very limited freedom while they were enjoying their unlimited power. In 2020, the year of elections, at first no one suspected there could be any protests at all. But the peaceful protests happened, and I guess the connections we had built and activities we had done in the independent cultural sphere, uniting and educating people, were one of the reasons for them as well. The protests inspired a huge wave of interest to the Belarusian culture we enjoy until now. Music, poetry, dances, creative posters were important parts of the street protests. But apart from that, musicians, writers, historians, and philosophers were invited to the so-called yacht meetings, organized by common people in one neighborhood in different cities. There were concerts, readings, lectures, and just talks. Later, when together with my husband, also a writer, Alger Bakharevich, we left Belarus at the end of November 2020, we decided that we could be the voice of the protesters that was needed abroad. As other Belarusian authors were giving dozens of interviews, writing essays and poems, speaking and explaining what was happening in Belarus. We're trying to do it even now when the world has lost its interest in Belarus, though the political and cultural situation there has seriously worsened. This cultural activism still takes place in Poland, Lithuania, Georgia, Germany, the US, and so on, where the Belarusian authors and publishers are still writing books in the Belarusian language, founding publishing houses and bookstores, organizing festivals and meetings with the interested readers in diasporas. We go on doing what we used to do in Belarus, though, of course, the circumstances are quite different. And the most important thing is we believe in what we are doing, though it's not so easy when you are separated from your own country, feeling isolated and completely unsure about the future of Belarus and the whole world. But the example of our predecessors from the 20th century who believed that Belarus had to be independent and the Belarusian language and culture had to flourish really inspire us. Sorry that it sounds a bit pathetic, but I'm an activist in this video, though I have never dreamt of becoming one. It was a nightmare for me, actually. But sometimes you have to take responsibility because you have your voice and you have the power of literature that can influence minds and hearts, that can really make a difference. So I hope with the case of Belarusian writers, I do manage to explain to you how literature can support ideas and activate and educate communities. And my question to you, dear experts, is the following. What the Western European writers can learn from the experience of Eastern European writers, not only Belarusian ones? And do they see any necessity to communicate with their non-academic readers in the face of the far right the latter vote for, to explain, to convince, to educate, to prevent the catastrophe? Or if not, who is going to do that?
Okay, experts.
Hi, my name is Vladimir Arsenievich. I'm a writer and the president and creative director of Association Crocodile from Belgrade, Serbia. I was invited to provide a short reply to the everlasting question, can writers be activists? 5 minutes is nearly not enough, so I'll try to be economical with what I think and how I say what I think. So can writers be activists? Of course they can. Anybody can be an activist. This is something that do not need specific qualifications for. You just need a firm faith that you feel that you need to stand up for, and this is what activism is all about. Are writers obliged to be activists? Not at all. My personal story and my personal experience is probably specific because my first book was published in the middle of the wartime in 1994 when Yugoslavia was disintegrated in the series of bloody wars. Furthermore, this debut novel of mine was actually discussing this sudden tragic shift in politics and social environment. And as such, it was hailed as the first anti-war book in not only Serbia but throughout the region of former Yugoslavia. That said, it appears that I did not really have a choice. From moment one, my literature was very political, and I never even tried to hide my personal attitude towards what was going on in the war. I was absolutely stunned and shocked and saddened with what was going on, and I tried to express these feelings in the book as well. This very soon after put me on the blacklist, and I was continuous in clash with political authorities in my country. In 1999, I actually had to flee. I went to Mexico, invited by the International Parliament of Writers as a writer in exile. And throughout, from then up until these days, and I'm talking about the relatively vast period of time of 30 plus years, I was fighting my political battles, and this is what I still do in Serbia and elsewhere. But nevertheless, I do not think that anybody who does not feel particularly inclined to do this needs to do it just because they happen to be writers or anything else for that matter. I think we express politics one way or another. If I decide to write a love poem in 1943 close to the concentration camp where people are, death camp where people are perishing in thousands, I should be entitled to do it. I think the history will read this love poem within the framework of the time and space, and it could be understood in a variety of different ways, and this is how it functions. Apart from that, I think no obligation exists, and sometimes, and we know that from the history of literature, the literary works that were not intentionally political or activist actually moved mountains and made people change societies and changed DNAs and minds and everything. So it's really hard, I think, even for the writer to say what kind of literature would leave the biggest impression onto the reader. Definitely didactic books that are intentionally written in order to promote certain ideologies are, by rule of the thumb, not good, not high quality artworks. So this is where we find ourselves. My reply to this dilemma was to keep writing whatever I'm writing, and also on another hand to do what I'm doing with Crocodile, which allows me to have this open field and promote any kind of politics that I like. Thank you.
For those of you watching this freshly, I will shortly introduce the questions that the videos posed to us. So Julia's question to us was, what can Western European writers learn from the experience of Eastern European writers? And do they see any necessity to communicate with their non-academic readers in the face of the far right? To explain, to convince, to educate, to prevent the catastrophe? Or if not, who is going to do that? And Vladimir actually forgot to mention a question in his video, so he sent it to us afterwards, and he writes, I mentioned my doubts regarding any specific obligation of a writer. What are your thoughts on this? Are writers, or should they be, obliged to promote politics, or at least certain values in their literary works? In case that anybody says yes, the additional questions are, how would one such obligation be enforced or penalized? And even more importantly, by whom? So we have about 20 to 30 minutes
to solve this.
Yeah.
Well, first, maybe just to start with a quick response from you to these questions. Does it raise any thoughts? Lisa, can I start with you?
Yeah, no problem. We'll start with me. Yeah, I've been thinking about this, especially Julia's question, of course, more and more. And well, at the same time, I went with you to Serbia 2022 in the summer, and it was very interesting to still see the little kiosks where they sold Putin mugs. And there were all these Kosovo is part of Kosovo is the beating heart of Serbia banners hanging on the main streets, and these were banners of like 100 meters long. They would be part of the whole street, and I thought that was very interesting as a writer, but I don't know enough about Serbia to say more about this. But I think for me personally, I'm just going to start, and please interrupt me so I don't help me, please. I've been more, as a writer, working more and more in Eastern Europe and also Middle Europe, Central Europe, also partly living in Bucharest now, traveling to Ukraine once in a half a year. I mainly have I see another problem as a writer in the Netherlands writing about this area, and that we need to rewrite or actually write 120 years of history into Western European history. And I think that's the starting point.
Okay.
And I think for Clarice, you have to write like 500 years back. So that's even longer, and I think that for me is the main question. And at the same time, well, you try to write history back into the current time, so people actually have knowledge about, for example, Ukrainian history. At the same time, you as a writer doing analog work, as a theater maker also, you have to fight against this total chaos that is happening right now if you look at data propaganda, which is way faster than writing. So it's just a shit show, actually. Yeah. This is my problem.
So, do you recognize this, Clarice, from your perspective, that the slowness of the indirectness of writing is a handicap? Could I say it like that?
I don't know if I would say it's a handicap. I think with the fast-paced world, you can definitely, be left behind. But I do think that, there's this saying, the soul travels by horse. And I feel like any form of art, so also literature, writing, is a very soulful work. Yeah. And data, not necessarily. So no matter how fast it goes, I think that the soul might move slower, but it's something that remains. It can never be destroyed, right? Yeah. So I think when it comes to speed, and when it comes to accessibility, perhaps it forms a problem that writing is slower, but I think when it comes to longevity and to depth, which to me is more important than speed, I think that is a byproduct of our capitalist society and world, that we think everything that is faster is better, but that is not true. Yeah. So so it does pose a problem, but I think within the problem there is also the solution, if that's makes sense.
That made me think of when I met you, Florina, some years ago. Vladimir was talking about moving mountains and fastness. We also think everything that's bigger is better. That's also a thing. You write in one of the smallest languages in Europe, Rheto-Romanis, if I pronounce it correctly. And meeting you, having a conversation with you, I found out that the act of writing and translating from and into this language is a very activist way of preserving something that is in danger. So how is it for you to write in this and hear these questions, of course, and to respond from this very small language?
Yeah, so maybe I'll start first with the questions
Yeah,
before.
yeah.
So I think I wear like two pairs of shoes or two different shoes. So I'm on the one side, I have a political organization that I started because it's called Anna Florin, and at the moment we are really defending safe space as affordable housings in Switzerland. And I started because I was writing a novel about what's going on in the villages where I grew up and where we have a huge problem with affordable housing, like almost everywhere. And I realized that I had the feeling that writing a novel is not enough.
Mm-hmm.
So I started to do this political work, to do a lot of sensibilization, to go on the street, to expose myself also in a different way as an artist. And then I had the feeling that a lot of people are not able to listen to words who are a manifest or who defend clear political statements. And I felt that maybe to write a novel is better because I can work more emotionally and also open the door to talk about the pain, the painful situation, and the taboo also was behind all these struggles that we have. And so it gave me. I went back to writing my novel. I continued to write the novel, and now I see that the novel really there's really completely different people who reads the novel. Mm. It was very important to write it in Romansh because I address certain people and their pain, and I wanted also these people to know that it's okay to talk about it, and. Yes, and I feel that it helps also the political organization who gets a new way of attention. Yeah. But one of my main questions in this whole process is really how can I write a novel with a clear political message? Also, as Vladimir said, with my opinion ways in it, but still, I'm an artist. I'm interested in the creative process, and how can it be political and poetical?
This is the question. Yeah,
can I
please.
Respond to that because is it on? Yeah, okay. It's something that I thank you so much for that. It's something that I absolutely recognize, and I think for me, I have a. Classical education as a journalist, and I think you too as well. You're also a journalist, and then I write and I also make documentaries. And the topics that I'm interested in are often revolving around, social justice, about change, about things that are pretty political. And at the same time, I'm also someone. I'm a creator, an artist, like you said. And I've always wondered because, society says, oh, but you can't be all of these things. You can't be and a journalist and a writer and a filmmaker because you have to choose. Yeah. What are you? Yeah. Sometimes people actually ask me that. What are you? Yeah. I say Clarice. That's nice to meet you. Yeah. And but for me it was a struggle, and particularly as a black woman with a refugee background, people often you're already othered, and people are often already sort of like how do you say that? Surprised by your existence, let alone your multidimensionality. Yeah. So this is something that you then start internalizing as a creator, as a maker as well. And it's been a journey for me because, so I started with journalism, but I've always been very, how do you say that, activist. And I say I'm activist in a sense that it's an action for me. It's a verb, not a noun. So it's not who I am, it's what I do. I incorporate it into what I do, but I don't identify as such. It is not my identity. And but from when I was a teenager, I organized debates, I made radio shows, dialogues about societal themes. I've started grassroots organizations. And I think, like you, I think it really helped me with my political education and my social education, but also the art of creating community and engaging with community, because I think that often when political work is made, it's so theoretical, which was also one of the questions, it's so removed from reality. And I think being a part of organizations and creating organizations and being so political helped me really be rooted in reality. And then, as a creator, I took that experience and that reality and then turned it into art. Or at least that is the motion that I'm trying to make. I don't know if it's a good motion or not, but it's at least the process that I now realize I've been going through, using those different experiences, whether it's personal or political or, within organizations, to create art. And then being able to shut off the, how do you say that, the obligation that you feel to say things in a certain way, to do things in a certain way, to make really political statements. I try to how do you access a place that is maybe controversial to say, non-apolitical. It's an apolitical space inside myself, but where it comes from a deep sort of like place of being, deep place of humanness, human emotions, human experiences, and then the political context is where it exists within.
Yeah. Can I add to that? Yeah. I think that's my favorite part of making art. It's like a trick. You fool people to come into something and they're like, oh, super nice, I like the space, let's look around. And I think, because I could never be a journalist, I don't know how you guys do it, it's insane. Also that you always have to be on top of things and find the niche perspective, and I'm very, please never take me to that place. And I think actually that's of course, what you do with art, but you can ask questions about current situations. I think I always do that, but you take it into another realm and you can make it magical almost. I want to make an example, I guess. In 2019, I created with a group of artists a virtual reality experience about how the MH17, the Dutch plane, crashed into Ukrainian fields in the Donbass. And in the Netherlands, that was the first time this war in the Donbass that was already happening for 97 days suddenly became a political thing in the Netherlands. Only because a plane with a lot of Dutch people was bombed. And then all of a sudden it's Western European news coming from the East. Yeah. And we struggled for a very long time with how much should we show of the drama, or should we show of there are no dead bodies in this whole experience. It's actually a sunflower field and the sky is blue the whole time. And at one point it turns dark. But that's the necessary part for the story. You cannot watch it anymore, I'm sorry. But it's beautiful, trust me. And we had people from all different regions in this area. A man who lost his daughter in this crash, who finally could be close to his daughter because he could not enter the area because it was a war zone. We had Ukrainian people, European people, Dutch people in it. It traveled all over Europe. But what I like the most that I can do is when I am invited to talk about this artwork, I never talk about the artwork. I only talk about all the stuff, the context that is around it, so I can use the artwork as an activist tool, because now I have an audience and I can tell you all the shit I want to tell you because it's necessary, because it's still war in many different countries, for example, or I have a point that I want to make, or I want to talk about Ukrainian history, for example. So I can kind of lure you into this nice place that I created for you, but it won't be cozy at all.
But what does it take to find this, what you mentioned as an apolitical space inside yourself? How do you cope with this, with the pressure of the real world always there?
I don't think that I have this apolitical space inside of me. I think that I'm full political. I think, it's not possible, but it's beautiful. I want it, but it's not possible. Well, because because I think I I never really saw myself as an activist. I just see myself as a participant of a quite intact civil society in Switzerland, and I really try to participate to defend my ideology and my ideals and my values, and to create safe space for different people, and against this whole inequality that really sucks. but to be, and I think just to have a society where artists or writers, it doesn't matter in which field, can still be part. That's just being. I mean, just to remain an artist, and that's also what we can learn from the writers of Eastern Europe. Just to remain, keep doing it. That's activism, and it does not really matter what you write about. I think it's not the content, but it's the form and the time and the place and the freedom. At the end, it's about defending a society who has space, who gives freedom to be concerned about things that are interesting. Yeah, I don't know. Sorry.
I think this also links to another thing that was mentioned by Vladimir, but also Clarice, earlier today you gave a really interesting lecture on the status quo of literature and its relation with activism. I think we already touched very much upon what we were discussing here, and one of the very interesting things you said, that stories could help us create something new and leave a system instead of always being inside that system. And I think it links to what Vladimir was also saying, like if I write a love poem in 1943 and then I should be, it should be okay that I do so, because it will be, looking back, it will maybe have different meaning. And I was really curious if you also use that in your processes or in how you maybe present your work, thinking about your future audiences or the future impact it might have, because it's so hard to step outside the system right now. But in the, how do you reflect? Do you even?
On what he said about using something other than the political statement to create your work, or
and are you aware, or whenever you're writing or in your processes, aware of, I'm doing this now and it might have different meanings in the future, different impact?
I think it's more a movement of future creating, so it's not a future that is already consolidated, it is a future that you're co-creating. So there is no one answer to it. It's being a part of the co-creation that, to me, feels like that is the answer. And I think also, to go back to the apolitical space, I'm a very political creative, let's be clear. What I mean with that is that sometimes we can get so carried away by what needs to change and what we have to say about it that we forget the why. And the why is the apolitical space, because it's not about, oh, we need more houses. It's about, I want to feel safe. I want somewhere where I can spend my time with my family and be safe. So that is the apolitical space that I'm talking about, which translates in a political way, obviously, because we live in a political world. But the feeling, the essence of it, is a very universal human experience. And I'm still navigating the balance between that, because sometimes I want to shout at everyone and be like, why does racism still exist? Why does colonialism still exist? And I do sometimes. But I'm talking about that layering of there's a layer of the thing we're talking about, the topical aspect of it that we see, and then there's the feeling. And I think to also answer your question, when we're talking about world building, which I think for me is more interesting now than, how do you say that, than criticizing, which can be a part of world building, but sometimes we focus so much on what we don't have and on the powers that are suppressing us that we forget that we have power as well to create, right? Everything that is created now, that exists in the world, has also come through art, through people that move, through organizations, through writing, through film, through speaking. Even if you look at what's happening in Palestine right now, there are still poems being written about it. Also, like Vladimir said, and it's not a poem that is void of political meaning because its whole existence is political. So I would like to focus on that, on that power of creation that we have that we sometimes forget.
Mm.
It's also like a double power because it's. I understand very well what you say with the political space, but I'm just very angry. So
Good.
I forget where the space is. But writing is a way to channel this anger and to get back there. And I think that's the beautifulest thing about literature is that you have somebody who writes it and somebody who reads it. So it can be on both sides. Oh. It can create on both sides this apolitical space.
Can I add maybe one thing? I think that maybe even for me personally, it's also to challenge the reader into this fantasy place, where because I have the feeling that we live in a less fantasyful world. Especially in the Netherlands, where we are very recht toe, recht aan, as we say. That's untranslatable because it's Dutch. It's something like gezellig, but then not gezellig. And I think that's something I really miss in the Netherlands as a writer, but also as an artist, that this not realistic fantasy where a character can fantasize about his new partner or lover or new house, but really about something otherworldly that doesn't really exist at all. It will never exist. It will be impossible. But because I think we miss the training to actually believe in the impossibility of something that can channel a lot of other things like anger, like hope, but like, mystical creatures, without treading into the fantasy world immediately or the sci-fi, but just to push the reality over the edge to see what happens on the other side. So you can, like you said in your Staat van het Verhaal earlier today, that you can actually look at the new beginning, but you need fantasy for it. And I think there's a lack of fantasy, at least here.
What do you think does fantasy? What does it need to? I know what it is, but what does it? If you say in the Netherlands there is less and less fantasy, so I'm asking myself, what does it need to
grow?
To grow, to make fantasy growing.
Oh. It's a good question. Can I go for half an hour and come back?
Can I go with you?
How should I I don't think we really have art is extremely conceptual, like someone puts a piece of paper on the ground and says climate change. I don't know. This very bad example. I'm not a conceptual artist. Or we have these very in millennial society, in Dutch society, literature, and of course not everything. It's not that black and white. Please help me, Clarice. I'm looking at you. But I think I miss the act of thinking very much outside the box while staying in the box. It's not a good answer. I'm not there yet.
But I'm just thinking if to make grow fantasy you need fantasy. It's like a domino or something. Not like a domino, but like a chain.
It's like reciprocal. You need it to create more of it.
It's like non-liberal playfulness.
You need creation to have creation.
I like that. Yes, exactly. What I like so much about your work, and we just saw the installation. I don't know if you've been, but you definitely should. And it was, Dance and Revolution. I love the dance and the aspect to the revolution. I think that playfulness creates or propagates imagination. So I think it's maybe playfulness. I think we, in Dutch society also, we're so serious about everything. Everything's so serious. And I think also this is not by accident, the fact that there is a lack of imagination. What is the first thing that dictators do, or authoritarian leaders, they cut funding to the arts, they cut funding to education, because all of that is part of imagination. And it makes people lose the belief that they have the power to change something or to create. And whilst if you take a step back and you look at history, for example, writer Ursula K. Le Guin, she says there was a time that it was unfathomable that the kings did not have power, that we could not imagine that because they were just all powerful. That is not the case anymore. So it is possible, but we have to be able to imagine that. And I think also for me personally, sometimes it's difficult because this is why I say sometimes we're so stuck on what is that we believe that it's all that is possible to be. And that is not the case. So it's also training the fantasy muscle, I think, or the imagination muscle. And
because we're never invited to actually, like, literature can give us the invitation to do it also.
Yes.
Because otherwise we're not invited to on other places, I mean.
Exactly. So I do think that's kind of our responsibility as writers and creators. And I think we can do it to invite people to play. As children, you do it automatically. And when I was a child, I was just walking around the yard and singing and having these imaginary friends and places and creatures, and I literally just came from war. So, I mean, if in that situation it's possible to, or maybe that was the reason, sort of escapism, but, but, we always have access to that. That is something that no one can take away from us, but we need to sort of continually remind ourselves of that, I guess, and each other.
And also remember that that's one of the only things that's not capitalized.
Yeah.
It's for free.
Yes, but that's not. Don't say it so loud, because then the cuttings will say yeah. No, but but it's kind of it's good because it's for free and it does not cost a lot to do it. But it takes a lifetime. That's also why we should be paid all. Yeah. So that's also very important. But what I'm thinking a lot about it is, I'm from Switzerland. I'm very privileged, and we have a lot of money. Not so much for retro-romantic literature, but we always find a gap. We're also used to it. But that this also how to share more without expecting or waiting for money for it. And we have a lot of tools with the digital world. And I'm thinking a lot about how to also, the tempo that we also talked before, how can we just publish and share faster. And so just reinforce a network. Oh, wait, sorry. English is not really my language. But what I want to say is that I think that it's a time that it's not so much about inclusion of people who are very different thinking, but it's about empower people who think the same or who have the same values. And then when we are strong again, then we can start to include all the others again. But first, we need a little to be powerful. Yeah. And I'm just thinking about this whole, I don't want to be alone in my little room and write my little books. I really want to be part of a network and that we all pass our little books to each other. And and I think that we have tools.
Can I ask?
Yes.
Because I feel like you already do that. So how do you do that?
Oh no, I don't know. I don't know. So, am I really doing it already? I don't know. You
said you have the organizing the community that you have, the novel that you're writing. So you're already busy with it, right?
Yeah, I grew up in a very remote place, and I learned from small on that everything is accessible, but you have to organize it by yourself. So I think I'm just keep doing it, and also And also what you said earlier about translation, so that's also the same. Yeah. I mean, it's really, if we want to meet, we need to talk to each other and we need to translate and to learn from our very diverse and very individual situations also and tongues.
Is this something that we can learn from, as was posed before, from Eastern European writers and writers in exile from Eastern Europe? I see them, for instance, also Vladimir, in Crocodile, the Belarusian writers that are very much united also in Germany. Can we learn something from that, as Florina is mentioning, how to organize ourselves? And do you see a deficit of that in the Netherlands also, Lisa?
I think he's asking you.
Yes.
Yeah.
I actually think we're at a difficult time at this point. I'm starting to work as a Raad van Bestuurslid at a Ukrainian organization in Rotterdam, Fataha, and I think they are experiencing that they are in a bubble.
Yeah.
And also their bubble consists of multiple bubbles. So you have like Ukrainians who are diaspora, Ukrainians who are refugees, Ukrainians who, like me, are not even diaspora anymore. And within all these groups, they also have different groups, but they also try to connect with the Dutch people. And this is the biggest problem, that still there's this, I don't know if this is an answer, but this is what I was thinking about.
Yeah.
And I like the conversation part, like how can we make sure that we get together because the bubbles are very real. And I think I'm not a grassroots person at all. I just get asked by all the grassroots people to do something, like translate between the different groups. But I think the way, what I've seen is that the way Ukrainians organize is without organization. And I think that's a great power, because they just do stuff.
Yeah.
They don't wait.
Yeah.
Most of the time they're too soon, and then nothing works, and it's very fun to be part of.
We need to vergaderen all the time.
Yes, we need to have a lot of meetings about the meetings, and that takes a lot of time. And I think that's what holds us back also. And we're not used to this system.
And it's also not so playful to have constant meetings.
So, for example, in Ukraine, when you know someone, but you need someone, they know someone, and in 2 hours you will be with that someone. And I think that is very, very important. And that's something I'm trying to do here. So if I'm asked by a Dutch radio station about Ukraine, I will bring a Ukrainian accordion player. He will talk all the time. And then I have like 1 minute of radio time. But I think that's super important. So also, that's also, I think, I was thinking about what Rebecca de Wit said. Just get out of your tower and never go in. Because you get invited to be in this ivory tower all the time. And you should never go there, even if you are like best-selling or whatever. Just stay on the ground floor and look around.
And then going to you, Clarice, you are a grassroots person. You did it many times. So when you listen to this, what's your view on it?
I think that's very true, and I think grassroots can mean different things for everyone. Grassroots just mean like getting to the core of something, and to just being very rooted on the ground, and not in your tower. So I think, stepping outside of your tower really helps. And what I was thinking about while you were speaking, I'm not well versed in Eastern European literature, but I grew up with a lot of Eastern European people, and also, I know Eastern European creators. And what always strikes me, but correct me if I'm wrong, is their potential to really dive deep into almost like a place of darkness, I would say, to not be afraid of that. To not be afraid to dive deep and to go dark, because I think you even said it it's said in your installation, because in the darkness is where you also find a light, or find a way to and you know it better, it's your work.
It's also part of the book that you have to, when you go deep into the darkness, it's like a spectrum.
Yes.
If there's more darkness, there's also more light. It's actually a nice thing, and it's very Ukrainian. Yes.
Right? I feel like, so there's a lot of courage, and I feel like there's also something which I also felt in your work very ancestral to it, and that's something that I also relate to, having a West African Liberian background. I use that in my work as well. For example, last year I made a VPRO Tegenlicht documentary, and it was about water and climate change. And you'd be like, oh yeah, okay, that's it. Seems like a straightforward topic, but I thought about, because it was also about what can we learn from other countries who deal with certain issues. So I thought about, like, how can I reframe this or rephrase it, and I was in contact with this Nigerian architect who is trying to build villages, cities on water, as an answer to climate change, and he's inspired by the Makoko village in Nigeria, which is like a settlement on the water. And there are people that came from like other West African countries, Benin, and you name it, like, I don't know, like 200 years ago, like fishermen, fisher people, and they just created this village on the water with sustainable, how do you call it, sustainable wood and materials, and there's like schools. It's literally like, when you see it, it's like magical. You're like, how does this even exist? But there is, there's poverty, it's unhygienic, there's like, the facilities and amenities are poor, are bad. But he went there and he saw something that, that others didn't. He saw a way to, he looked at it differently. And he saw what he could learn from those communities. So, and also to enhance it, he used his education to think about, okay, so how can we also tackle the problems that they're dealing with also day to day? So he created this prototype, which was also at a museum in Rotterdam. What's it called?
Boymans?
New Institute?
New Institute, yeah.
Was it a New Institute?
Yeah, it was.
I know, you can Google it. But, and he created this prototype, and he actually, there's also one in Cape Verde. But anyway, so the documentary was about, possible solutions to this problem that we have right now, right? Also in the Netherlands, particularly in the Netherlands, is going to be a major problem. It already is. And then I went even further back, thinking about the Yoruba pantheon, which is like a religion in Nigeria and in West Africa, with deities that are connected to nature. And you have this water deity called Yemoja, and that's the water goddess. And the way that people practice that religion and the way it is connected to nature can also teach us something about how we can be reconnected to nature, and which will change our relationship to it, and also the way that we treat the earth and the way we deal with water, instead of sort of stopping the water, living together with water.
But
so
imagining also a future.
Imagining and reimagining, and sort of also using very old traditions, very old practices and religions, and taking from that what you need, because I'm not saying everything has to be exactly as it was. I'm saying go back and take what you need to sort of like reimagine the future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, we could talk for like 2 days.
Yeah.
But we have another panel, and I think it's a really good invitation also on them to reflect on what you have been saying, and how you can organize yourselves, what you need to do that, because that's what we're going to talk about in the next panel. Thank you so much, Flurina Badel, Weeda, Clarice Gargard.
Thank you so much. Oh, wait, what then again?
Answer the questions.
I think you answered the questions, and I think you put some new questions forward. And there is now an ivory tower and an apolitical space added to it. Thank you so much. I think we will invite the next panel. They are here. I think. Could I ask to join us Jurgen Maas, Alyssa, Saro, and Richard Kofi? That's it. Hi. Hi. We are going to do the same round again as we did before. Here's another glass of water.
So we have again reached out to 2 international people in our network to reflect on the question for the second panel, which is how can literature support activists? And then with literature we mean mostly literary organizations, literary curators, so like the structure beneath literature, how can we support activism and activists? So the panel is Alyssa Saro from Trill, a youth community organization from Belgium, Richard Kofi, who is a lot of things, a programmer, interdisciplinary artist, theater maker. Start there. Yeah, it's a lot more to say about it. And a publisher, Jurgen Maas. Welcome. And so we have invited 2 international guests, and we will first watch 2 of the videos again, and then talk to you about it. So first we have a video by Patrice Hutton. She is the executive director of the organization Writers in Baltimore Schools in the USA. They are dedicated to creating communities of support in Baltimore City public school students through in-school, after-school, and summer programs to build literacy and communication skills. And then we have a video contribution by Julia Kozlovets, who is the director of the Book Arsenal Festival, which is part of a cultural institute in Kiev, Myschetsky Arsenal. And she leads an international literary festival that is also a book fair in Kiev for a lot of years, and the last 2 years they also organized this festival while being in this war, and they managed to do so, and it brings even more. Well, she would talk about it herself for a bit, I think.
Right,
yeah. So let's go. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Patrice Hutton, and I'm the founder and director of Writers in Baltimore Schools. I'm so grateful that you all invited me to speak with you today. Writers in Baltimore Schools is a nonprofit organization that provides a community of support to young writers, building literacy skills and empowering expression. We do so by offering programs for Baltimore students ages 8 through university level. Our core program runs weekly creative writing clubs in Baltimore City Public Schools for elementary and middle school students. In the summer, we offer a 5-week youth employment program where high school-aged writers work with us to produce an anthology of younger students' writing. The final week of this program is a week-long residential camp where students live in dorms on a college campus. As I consider the question, how can literature support activists, Baltimore's young writers sit front and center. These are students who attend schools with "do not drink" signs affixed over water fountains, as the outdated piping in schools is coated in lead and the water undrinkable. These are students who came of age under the presidency of Donald Trump. And some of these students, now alumni of the program, were in high school when a young man named Freddie Gray was killed while in custody of the Baltimore Police Department in 2015. Freddie Gray's death ignited protests across the city, which are referred to as the Baltimore Uprising. These students navigated their teenage lives as the Maryland National Guard rolled into Baltimore, turning their home into a police state. That week, Writers in Baltimore Schools held what we call the Write-In, an event we opened to youth in the community. Students, their family members, and other community members gathered to reflect, read, and write poetry about race, racism, and police brutality. This write-in was unfortunately not our first. In 2014, a St. Louis grand jury did not indict a police officer who shot an 18-year-old man named Michael Brown. We held a write-in after that verdict. We held more after the election of Donald Trump, virtually during COVID-19 lockdown, and during the 2020 summer of protest ignited by the police murder of George Floyd. At each of these write-ins, older, established members of the Baltimore literary community were present to guide the young writers through conversation and prompts. 2 of our board members attended the Iowa Writers Workshop, and they've been generous with their time and mentorship at these events. These mentors treat the students as artistic equals, but know that it's the students who are experts on being a young Black person in Baltimore. Here, we have local literary giants seeing, affirming, and guiding young activists who are fighting for their city. I believe the write-in model could be taken and applied in communities across the globe as circumstances necessitate spaces for dialogue and reflection. When considering how literature can support activists, I think of the poets we've engaged with at write-ins. At the write-in for Freddie Gray, we read and discussed poems by Audre Lorde and Morgan Parker, to which the youth responded with their own writing. In response to Morgan Parker's "I feel most colored when I am thrown against a sharp white background," an elegy, then 17-year-old poet Jada Griffin responded, "Every night, though, I feel colored, as the beautiful blackness of the sky gets no attention. only the moon and the stars. Morgan Parker had a poem ready for a Baltimore teenager. Her words were ready to catch and inspire a student whose bus commute to school was disrupted by an excessive military presence. When considering the position that literary organizations should take to support youth activism by literary artists, I implore them to consider the youth, to consider the teenage poet who will find hope in brave words. I implore them to build spaces for the youth, for the future writers, the future activists. Literature can support activists first by existing bravely, and literary organizations can support activism by building spaces that invite, welcome, and listen to their community's youth. I would like to ask the panel to talk about how literary organizations they represent or are involved with have responded to events and issues in their communities. I would be so grateful to learn from your work in this area.
My greetings, dear colleagues. I'm happy to be here today with you. First of all, I want to thank the organizers for inviting me. It's a big honor and pleasure for me to talk to you today and to share with you some of my thoughts and ideas about activism and about activism of bookish people from my position, from the place where I am. My name is Yulia Kozlovets. I'm director of International Book Arsenal Festival, which is an annual project of Mistetsky Arsenal, the leading cultural institution in Ukraine. It is situated in Kiev, and our festival is held annually in Kiev as well. From here, from Kiev, I want to share with you my ideas on activism and on its role in our history. Ukrainian history and culture have experienced many losses and destructions due to the Russian occupation, due to repression and acts of genocide. In moments of threat, there always were people who were able to pass on the memory and to continue the connection between generations. If we will look back to the past, we will see that we have huge, terrible gaps in our history and in our culture because of the periods of repression or genocide. And it is a completely unexplainable how it happened. It's like a miracle, really, that each time there was a person or a few persons or the communities, a group of people, this thread who passed the memory and history on to the next generations. When Russia tries now to erase and wipe out Ukrainian culture, it is not enough just to remember the names. It's not enough just to remember those who died in the struggle, but it's important also to know and to remember their stories, to remember history. This is what happened, for example, to Volodymyr Vakulenko. I want to give you the real example of literature activism in Ukraine in a few last years. Volodymyr Vakulenko was a children's author, a writer, who met the Russian occupation in his native village of Kapitolivka in the Kharkiv region. On March the 21st, 2022, already anticipating danger, he wrote his last entry in his diary. "I believe in victory," he said. 3 days later, on March the 24th, he was executed and he was killed by the occupiers. The writer's body was found after the liberation of Kharkiv region by Ukrainian army, buried next to hundreds of other victims of this tragedy. Only in September 2022, Ukrainian writer Victoria Melina, who was the writer of books for kids and adults, who was also the civil activists and investigators of war crimes, Victoria managed to find and save Vakulenko's diary. And it was really a miracle as well. She found this diary being buried under the cherry tree in the garden of Vakulenko's yard. This book became another important testament to the struggle and strengths of Ukrainian people. If Volodymyr Vakulenko's diary will not be found, the Russians who killed him could have erased his history, his story. and we would not have known the full story of this great struggle and strength. Victoria Melina, who died in 2023, a week after the International Book Arsenal Festival 2023, on which she was a guest and the participant of a lot of events, and read her books and her stories. So Victoria died, leaving a significant mark on Ukrainian literature and activism. She worked on her book, War and Justice Diary, looking at women looking at war, to tell the stories of Ukrainian women fighting the occupiers. It contains documented testimonies of women who, like herself, resist aggression on a daily basis. To usual people, lawyers, military personnel, human rights activists, doctors, IT managers, cultural managers, writers, translators. This book will become not only a literature monument, but also a voice for Ukrainian women who want to tell the world the truth about the war, to tell their stories. Since the outbreak of full-scale war, Ukrainian society has surprised the world with this strength, with the ability to organize resistance. Since gaining independence, Ukrainians have been united by shared values and willingness to defend their future. Civil society has been a driver of these processes, offering solutions that go beyond narrow interests and serve society as a whole. And bookish people, literature people, writers, real voices of their generations are and were usually the significant part of this movement. Cultural and civil activists play an important role in restoring and strengthening our identity. For example, the Book Arsenal Festival has become a landmark event that has contributed to the development of Ukrainian literature and the formation of national identity. Contemporary cultural festivals, particularly in the regions, bring together different communities and provide resources for resistance of people and impetus to the development of important topics to be discussed right now. These events and these cultural institutions who are organizing them are activists as well. They are playing an active role in the history in which we are living right now. Today, Ukraine is an example of a society that is able not only to resist, but also to develop culturally, even in the face of war. These civil society practices and cultural events demonstrate that our society has become a place where communities come together for freedom and truth. For writers, it's important that their texts are read, that they are translated into foreign languages, that people know about them. This is how we put specific names and Ukrainian literature in general into the global context. The reader can realize that these books were written during the war, that their authors died. This realization is very, very important. This is part of the cultural struggle. It is important for us to become a part of world literature and world culture, to tell the truth in our own voice. It is also important that the new generation of Ukrainians knows contemporary writers who died as a result of Russian aggression. We all live with losses now, and now it is important not to be silent, but to talk about them, to talk about the dead writers, to make them closer to people. During the full-scale invasion, dozens of Ukrainian artists, writers, translators, cultural managers were killed in the ranks of the armed forces of Ukraine. In conclusion, I would like to note that activism for me is not only about Ukraine. Rather, for me, Ukraine is a great example on how humanity can change life for the better, if it really wants to. Acting means today voicing things that most people don't want to hear. It means discomfort and irritation. Activism is, as we have all noticed, quite difficult. But we have come so far that if we don't change the world right now, comfort can turn into hell tomorrow. These were my thoughts, my private thoughts and thoughts from the point of my experience, and I will be happy to hear the real examples of activism in your countries from our dear panelists. Thank you for attention.
Short summary. to know what we'll be discussing in this panel. So, Patrice Hutton from the Baltimore Writers in Baltimore Schools asked us, have you or your literary organization responded to events and issues in your community? And Julia Kozlovets added to that, acting means to take voice in things that most people don't want to hear. It means discomfort and irritation. Activism is, as we have all noticed, quite difficult. But we have come so far that if we don't change the world right now, comfort can turn into hell tomorrow.
Jurgen, people say you are an activist publisher. Do you recognize?
Yes.
Do you recognize something in what Julia said about it being difficult but necessary?
It's getting more and more difficult. And Florina, she said that she is angry. Mm-hmm. I'm not only angry, I'm also afraid.
Okay.
First of all, in the Netherlands, we have an extreme right-wing government who are trying to silence voices. Mm-hmm. Voices, for example, in Germany, Palestinian voices in Germany that are already silent. And then if you see how a big organization like the Frankfurter Buch Fair reacts on it, or PEN International in the Netherlands, I mean, they had a statement on Palestine, on the genocide, about 3 months ago, and there was a mess inside the organization, I mean, under the members. Yeah. And so we have to speak out more and more. I mean, the urgency is there. We have a war in Europe since 2014. Many people don't know that Ukraine is in Europe. Yeah? We had a terrible war in Syria for 11 years. Yeah. And that war is still going on. We have a genocide in Gaza. And people are not obliged to speak out, but I want to. Yeah, I feel to. I'm a human being.
And
I have a heart.
And your fear is focused on, is your fear the far right as we are?
In the Netherlands, yes. Yeah. Yes. I don't know what kind of democracy we have in 10 years. Yeah. I mean, I'm a white man, 55, living in Amsterdam West, so I'm still quite safe. Yeah? And I'm not kidding. People are laughing, but I'm not kidding. So, yes, right. But on the other hand, I mean, what we have to know, of course, is that I do publish, for example, Riyad al-Madoun, who is a Syrian, Palestinian, Swedish poet. Yeah. And once a famous, I forgot his name, famous Swedish poet did ask him, why are all your poems about the war? And he said, let me first ask you a question. Why are all your poems about trees, the bees, the flowers, the snow? And this poet said, well, that's my environment, you know, and I like to garden. And Riyad al-Madoun said, you know, the war, that's my environment. That's the biggest part of my daily life. So is his poetry political? I don't know. It's about himself. It's his daily life.
Do you recognize, Richard, this fear?
Yeah, I do. I recognize the fear, but also a sense of pessimism in general about the state of affairs, the way we're going. Pessimism.
We have in our project, international project, a Bulgarian partner, and one of the members was living in the Netherlands for a while. And when the election result was announced, she was so surprised that we didn't go into the streets altogether. Did you go? No, probably not. None of us went. Yeah, what's going on?
It's a great question, but also a little bit of a mean question. Because I always hope to express myself in my art, because if I go to the streets, I know I might be a little bit too violent, but no. But really, it's what is so disappointing about this time is that even our most progressive institutions are also kind of, I wouldn't say leaning right, but just surrendering to the current political climate. And that the fact that you see people surrender, like those are the same. Well, I'm not going to call out anyone that's not in the room, but for instance, an arts platform that has been always supportive of activist voices, all of a sudden really is super conservative, makes this turn, you're like, huh? But
what's going on?
A couple of years ago, we were like, cool. And what's at stake is, like you said, it's like freedom of speech is like our democracy and the very basics of that. And the biggest institutions, the biggest partners of us artists and writers, are making that turn.
If we listen to Julia and also to Patrice, we noticed the urgency to reach out and to respond and to preserve and to. Alyssa, you work with communities throughout Belgium, of course. We notice a sense of fear and pessimism. We have the right wings in the Netherlands. The situation in Belgium is almost the same. Not as bad, but well, maybe it is. How do? First of all, do you recognize the pessimism that Richard is talking about, or how do you keep your optimism?
I recognize the pessimism, the fear. I think our organization is a little bit in a more safe environment as well because we're under a different subsidy arrangement. But I think it was what Clarice said that organizations are afraid of cutting of funding. A lot of organizations are stuck on well, they're wholly dependent on funding from the government. So you get into this catch-22 position where you want to make art that's culturally relevant, but you need the government for it. So you shut up and you silence the authors and the artists that have the will and that ask you to do so, and it becomes a difficult situation. I see that as well in Belgium. Yes.
But I'm not a pessimist.
No. I just wanted to ask. So this is the situation, and how to respond to this? Because I think the way you perform in your work and the things you do shows us there is a need to respond to it. Maybe to go into that, you're not a pessimist. Where do you grow and nurture your optimism?
You have to be. I'm a pest optimist. There was a Palestinian author. He's dead, and with an Israeli passport, by the way. And he wrote a fantastic novel in the 80s called "The Pest Optimist." I mean, I have to be optimistic. Otherwise, what should I do with the rest of my life? If I'm not optimistic, why should I publish books? Why should I give an Uyghurian author publish his book into Dutch for those 1,000 people who read it? Yes, I have to be optimistic. And where was I? I was last Sunday. I was at Druk. It's called Druk nowadays in Amsterdam. It's the beurs for
a fair.
A fair for special publishers, and I was there as a visitor. And normally there are only people who look like me and who are even older. You know, like you, 60, 58 and older. 58 and older. But now was the half of the people, and there were 1,000 people, I think, like all these people here sitting in this audience. You know, between 25 and 30, and there is a new generation. I mean, there are many interesting young people in Amsterdam. Well, I mean, this is a city where I live, and you know it at our test. So there is a new generation coming. So. And we have to be optimistic. But I have a daughter, and she's 13, and I don't know if she will live in a better time in 5 years, in 10 years, or in 15 years. That's my pessimism. I mean, there will be a time she will live in a better time than now.
This is interesting because you work in an organization concerned with youth communities, and I think also the responsibility for educating was mentioned in one of the videos. And also, like, we generally associate youth with hope. How do you manage that?
How I manage being optimistic and hopeful. Or,
in taking this responsibility to educate.
I think what we do, we do art education for children and youths. We focus specifically on children in societally vulnerable groups, and we use art as connection. We use art as a way for them to explore art, because we have to educate on art, but also explore themselves, explore the world. And it helps to, it's a bit of education and giving them tools to express themselves. And then what we try, one of our big values is ownership. So we try to really open space for them and let them come in the way they want and organize the way they want. So in the last couple of years, that's not the kids, but the younger 20-somethings or the 18, 20, they come to us and they ask for help on organizing and getting organized. So we've organized open mics around Palestine. Last week we had a fundraiser for Sudan, and we help them and give them tools on how to do production, how to organize and literally turn on a mic or get a draaiboek going, stuff like that. And we just open our space and see what you want to do, and we come do it with you. And I don't know if that's a full answer, but that's a little bit, it happens. You just open the space, and then it happens, and you help them and give them the tools. Yeah.
And you Richard, you in your work, you're also involved, what we mentioned before in the previous panel, rewriting history. You work a lot with museums, for instance, and cultural institutions. Do you see that your work, and this is also a question that I have later for you, but do you see that your work is provoking a change?
It kind of depends on the context. But I really want to come back to one earlier point. My pessimism is actually the thing that fuels me.
Okay.
Because then I'm just like, oh yeah, I might as well take on this challenge. Oh, I might as well. Because what does it even matter? Not necessarily that I don't matter, but like if I do nothing, then nothing changes or nothing happens. So actually I think that my pessimism, which has been there for a while, has fueled me to make a lot of bold choices, I think, in the last couple of years. So I'm actually quite proud of
being a pessimist.
Well, I'm not proud of being a pessimist, but I'm proud of the fact that it gives me energy nonetheless. So I appreciate your words of hope and optimism. I really do. But that's not the thing that fuels my fire. And one of the things, why I said that it depends on the context, is, for instance, which kind of ties into the pessimism, I had a really big gig at the embassy in Indonesia. The Dutch embassy in Indonesia, where we did this big, Clarice mentioned Yemanja. In the same pantheon, there's La Sirène, and we did a project about La Sirène, West African spirit. We wanted to do an open call, involve all of these Indonesian artists to come up with their own mythical, speculative ideas about a magic underwater world. Well, there was one in Java, Nyiro Kidul, really big figure. So we did something about that. And out of our conversations during the making process, the artists were like, yeah, we actually really want to, because we are making this in the spirit of Nyiro Kidul. She's from the queen of the southern seas and really powerful deity. We really have to be honest. It's like, okay, so what do you want to be honest about? Yeah, then we have to also shout out the activists that have been killed by the regime over the last couple of years. I didn't know anything about that. But so what we did was create an art project that was actually about the causes that these activists were killed for. Presented that in the Dutch embassy, which was then one of the few safe spaces in Jakarta, which is an amazing city, but for certain freedoms, I mean, there you have to be in a safe space, and the Dutch embassy is one of the few spaces that you can really say anything you want. So yeah, that's what we did. We used that platform to also talk about the issues that were at hand there, also the perspectives. We showed the activists. We made an entire, from poetry to videos to dance performance, all about that. And I think why I said it depends on the context, because now specifically these places are losing their cultural subsidies. So now you can't do such a thing anymore. You can't bridge that gap. You can't use it in that particular way. So then we have to find other places. And now I'm trying to be that person in International Theatre Amsterdam to make space for voices while the rest of the context is getting more and more hostile.
This is something that related to this. You said I published this Auguran writer for 1,000 readers. Do you have the same feeling that change is possible? It has meaning to do this. I think you do, because otherwise you wouldn't. But is this also something that you're concerned with? That these places are where you can actually talk about these books, where you can invite these writers also. This is also what you do, of course. They are disappearing or under stress.
No, I don't see. Sorry, no, I don't see that yet. No, and yes, I do. Think that publishing those books has an effect, but don't ask me what kind of effect. It gives me a lot of energy. I mean, we did publish Stanislav Asayev, who was in a Russian FSA cell for 1,000 days after the shutdown. I do publish the Uyghur writer, who is already since 6 years in a camp. We don't know where. We did publish Mustafa Khalifa, a Syrian writer who was for 13 years under the ground, in a prison. So if those people can survive that, then I can survive as a publisher, and I can be less optimistic.
So that's your fuel.
Yes, that's my fuel. Another example is that we do a project. I do it with a Dutch organization, the Hope Foundation. They work already for 30 years in Gaza. We do publish now since 2 years. Every year a novel from Gaza, selected by literary people in Gaza. And they made a selection of 5 titles in the last 3 months. Can you imagine? During the genocide, under the bombs, they read books, just for those 1,000, 2,000, maybe 3,000 Dutch readers. Does it make sense? Yes, it does. Inshallah.
So this is also something that we spoke about before, of course. There is, and Florina mentioned it as anger. Is this also a fuel that we feel, and also what Julia was talking about in the video, a responsibility that comes from that?
For me personally, I see a lot of anger, and I also understand the pessimism, and we see a lot of anger, and I also have anger. And completely forgot my point. Can you repeat the question?
The question was: is the anger the fuel for the responsibility we feel and for our actions?
Yeah, for me, the responsibility comes more from the fact that as a funded organization, you have a power, and it's very important to recognize that and to constantly question what you do with it. So it doesn't just come from anger; it just comes from the idea that you have in what happened a year ago in Belgium is that a lot of artists and writers started knocking on doors of institutions and starting asking institutions to speak out, and all these institutions that say that they are for the artists, they're for the authors, they remained neutral and expressed feelings of sympathy, and I think that is we have a certain power and we have a responsibility towards the people who we say in our mission statements that we are acting towards. And I think that as organizations we can really we could join together and use a collective power that we have to still influence. I think that it comes less from anger than from, I think, a deep belief that we have that responsibility, that we need to do this.
Is that, Alyssa, working for ITA, as you do now, and for many other places, of course, but Is this the same? Do you on behalf of this big organization in theater feel that responsibility to connect to communities and to connect to history? And
oh yeah, I feel more loyal to the community than to the institution. But like I'm just one person in the entire framework of what ITA is. I just whoever I work with, I just try to remind them of the promises, like you said, that they have in their mission statements, or the promise that they have towards the cultural field or the artists, like you also mentioned. But so I have a different position. I'm not the head of an organization.
And in your view, how much reminding do literary institutions or cultural institutions actually need?
Well, as you mentioned before, if funding is in danger, then people start making different choices. Well, certain people do, not everyone. You just try to remind them of the mission that they. That's basically all you try to do, and try to create with that little space that question gives you. Try to create something that gets a lot of attention, I guess. Yeah, that's also part of it. Yeah.
Can I maybe add something? What I feel and what I see a lot in organizations is that there's, you have that mission statement, and you have, in small organizations, 10, 15 people working and really believing in it. And then you still have the idea that the organization is sort of powerlessness, and it creates a huge rift in organizations. So I know that it's a difficult situation, and it's not just that it's hollow words, but there's a difference still between the ideas that the people that work there have, and the things that the organization then still decides to do out of the fear. Yeah.
And in publishing, I think, Jurgen, you're a publishing house, which consists of you. No.
I do work with 7 freelance people.
Freelance people, yeah, but
7.
Yeah, but you are like the odd one out, right? In publishing, you are the odd one out. I don't think the responsibility you take on for certain literature is being shared by many publishing houses
in the Netherlands.
In the Netherlands, yeah.
No, that's not true.
Not true?
No, it's not true. I mean, maybe on the left side. I mean, you have an extreme right-wing publisher in Groningen who does it at that side.
Oh, that way.
You have the big publishing houses who also publish about the Middle East, but you don't see it because you do see it, but they do publish 200 other books. And yes, I have a main focus, and that's the Middle East and the voices that came to Europe in the last 10, 15 years, mainly from the Middle East.
And do you think that your way of publishing, with your focus, and I think I would call it activist publishing, or also your love for these authors and these books, is changing the world of publishing, or is influencing for the better? Do you have any power on that matter?
No.
Influence?
I don't know. The thing is, I'm very dependent of people like you, booksellers. And the problem in the Netherlands is that 80% of the booksellers don't read the books I publish. So if they start reading those books, I will have influence.
Yeah. How do we get them to read the books?
Funding? No, I don't know. I don't know. But
do you recognize this problem in the chain, in the infrastructure, that you can be very, successful even and doing really good stuff at one point, but then somewhere there's a bottleneck and it doesn't go on?
Oh yeah, that happens all the time. Yeah, I fully recognize what you're saying. It's like, how to reach audiences, how to really get some traction in something. That's a very complicated thing. But also, sometimes it's also hard to kind of predict what's going to happen. I remember working for the Tropenmuseum when we did Heden van het Slavernijverleden, Afterlives of Slavery in English. An exhibition which had like the smallest budget, the shortest amount of preparation time, and became a big thing, a big conversation piece, luckily. But it's not that they really bet on us. which I don't blame them, but I mean, that's just what the situation was. So basically, you find yourself with a set of people and a set of resources every time, and you try to make the best of it. And sometimes it works, many times it, you know, it's nice, but it's like for smaller audience.
And not even depending on the funding or the size of the operation.
Well, of course, the more the better, but that's not a given that you're getting that. So then you have to make it anyway. You have to try something. That's where.
It's interesting because to me it associates with the miracles that Julia mentioned, like how we need the miracles. But I guess the big question is also how can we help the miracles or support them happening more often, which is.
Yeah, especially Julia, for example. I mean, I do live in the Netherlands. She lives in Ukraine. She said that I think around 1,000 people in writing industry, you use the word industry, are killed on the front. No?
Yeah.
We have 2 authors who went to the front in Ukraine, but they came safe back. Yeah?
So.
I can only agree. Yes. Looking at the time. We need to find some way of concluding this.
I don't think we can conclude it. Somehow I have the feeling that we have been talking about the apolitical space and the ivory tower and the fuel, all things that came up. This is what I like about these conversations, is that because we put it online and we have a follow-up again, I think already in January in Torino, we have a next conversation.
Where we will talk about artificial intelligence.
And also about the speed.
Seems very different, but it is not.
Thank you for the metaphor of the soul and the horse, because I think that will be a wonderful way to start that conversation. I think the question that Julia and Patrice put to us is how do we respond? And you say we are in the Netherlands. This is a difference. But I would like to conclude maybe with the question: is it?
No. What I try to say is that if you compare the situation in the Netherlands with Ukraine, we are a totally different country. We don't live in a war.
Of course, no.
We have Wilders. They have Trump.
No.
That's what I.
The problem. Every context comes with a certain set of responsibilities, right?
Yeah. So that exactly.
Yeah, because I think the problem with us is we're not in a war, but it makes it easier to close your eyes to things that we are a part of and the things that we are responsible for. So we're safer in that respect, but we're not less implicated.
I agree.
Yeah, and I also do think to add to that not to confuse the one piece with the other piece, but I think that artists are also, like Baldwin said, here to disturb the peace. So if the peaceful situation in the Netherlands is just shutting our eyes and doing whatever funding the funds asks of us, we need to take some responsibility to disturb that peace, and I feel that we each have our own strategy in that and our own attempts.
Disturbing the peace.
Yes.
I think this is a great. Thank you so much, Richard, for bringing in Baldwin. And I think looking at the time, yes, we are at the end of this conversations. Thank you, Alyssa. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Jurgen, so much, and also thank you, Lisa and Clarice and Flurina, for the first panel. Kim, do you have some last stunning words for us, or?
Stunning. Okay, no pressure. I have practical words for you. So we are live streaming this. I hope we have an international crowd online. But we also made a recording. We will publish it later. If you want to reflect on it, share in your network, please do so. We will continue this conversation by the end of January in Turin. Will also be live streamed. Find us online to be there. Yes, well, I think a lot of fuel here as well to continue. So thank you so very much.
Thank you. Je bent toch een geweldige kerel.
Dankjewel.